Hey, good morning. Well, correction, good afternoon. It's 12:30. I first of all want to follow up with yesterday's post and just be pointing out that I'm feeling a ton better. Um, it's still rainy and shitty out, but I don't know. I seem to do better emotionally when it's raining than I do when it's just gray. So, um, that's how it goes. You just kind of I've learned to run with it, and some days are better than others, and you just kind of gotta grind through them, like I said, and eventually you get to the good days again, and whatever. So, as you can obviously see, I went ahead and started inking this last night, yesterday, sometime. Um, got pretty far into the characters. The one that's left is Paragon. I just was doing a little bit of tightening up of the pencils for her, and now I'm getting back into the inks. Um, if you're curious about tools for once, my ink is, you can't tell by the jar because this is a secondhand jar, but it's Speedball. I bought the great big, like 32 milliliter or whatever it is, bottle of it. It's not my favorite ink, but for $15 or $16 or whatever it was for a 32 milliliter bottle, it gets the job done, and it's relatively low priced. I've definitely had worse. I've had better. My favorite ink is actually Dr. Martin's, Dr. P.H. Martin's Bombay, just their sort of baseline ink. I've gotten some of their higher end ink too, and it's like 2 to 3 times the price, and it's just, as far as I can tell, the same thing. I like that ink because it's a little more carbony, so it lays down blacker, and the speedball can get a little thin. You can maybe see here, especially in like her hair. It can be a little bit gray at times, which I filter that out in Photoshop usually, so it's not that big of a deal. Um, and the other problem I have with the speedball ink specifically is that it's a little more like with the shellac. It's got a little more shellac in it, um, so it tends to gum a little quicker, like go stale. And it because it's less carbon in it. It doesn't clog my brushes as fast. Doesn't kill them as fast. But it's still it's also a little more acidic because of the shellac. So it's sort of a trade off of what's what. Forgot to do the star on Paragon. I've been drawing for years and years and years, and I still can't draw a fucking star to save my ass. Especially one in perspective. That's about as good as you're going to get. So my favorite drawing tool, hands down, is brushes. Is particularly this brush, or this brand and size of brush. Um, pencils are great for doing layouts, but they're garbage for doing textures, and I'm not careful with pencil. I don't lay down a sheet of paper to keep it from smearing, and I don't care. I love doing ink work with the brush. I've used some like dip pens, and they're okay. I can't ever get the texture I want out of it. I've always aimed for a more smooth, clean texture. Oh, wiggles. I'm a little extra caffeinated today, so the wiggles can be a problem when that's the case. Usually my hand's pretty steady, but you know, sometimes. Let's see, what does her shoulder pad look like? I really wish I had some solid reference material for these characters, because this, you know, I looked around on the website for the actual strip comics, and a lot of the shots that the previous artist was doing tended to be front shots, a lot of head shots, which, given, you know, the format, I get why, but that kind of hindered my options for reference. So something I'm bearing in mind right now is this figure is in front of this figure. I'm keeping a hierarchy. So like, this is the figure that's the closest to the camera, so she's going to have the biggest outlines. This monstrous machine thing is more massive, so it's also going to have really big outlines, just to help demonstrate the weight of it. So that gets a little tricky, because this hand is much smaller than this machine, but it's much closer to the camera. So you got to kind of sort out, what are you doing with the outlines there? You know, and I went back, and after I did this machine, I kind of bumped up some of her outlines here just to keep a little more contrast and help with that visual hierarchy. So the same thing's probably going to happen here with Phantasma and Paragon. I need to keep the line weights to be appropriate for Paragon. She's kind of she's the grown-up character, so I'm okay giving her a little bit, not bulkier, but a little bit more weight to the lines. She's also got one of the darker costumes of the bunch, so again, more weight with color theory. And I need to clean out my ink jar, because I got all kinds of shitty little ink crumbs all over it. So I'm trying to keep, you know, that hierarchy in mind, and not get too carried away with the line weights on the outside. I can also, because Paragon has a darker outfit generally, it's a sort of a aquamarine or ultramarine blue, maybe, somewhere around there, and gray. So I can actually bulk her up a little bit more in the shadow areas. I haven't gone to shadows for here yet. I've gone with them here, because Phantasma's costume is super bright. It's like bright blue, bright yellow, bright pink, I think, something like that. And there just aren't a lot of opportunities to add shadow for that, which is, you know, as far as character design theory goes, it kind of makes me wonder about that, because she's not very outgoing as a personality. She's kind of the quiet one of the bunch. So a little curious there. I really should have drawn this hand in more. Alright, so finger, knuckle. This might end up badly, but I can still white out. So I'm just going for it. Finger, finger, finger. This finger is there. Alright. Thumb. Yep. That one looks like a dick. Yep. Okay. I'm going to stop there and stop screwing with it and go back and fix it later. Sometimes I can pull off drawing directly in ink. you know, that's something that I've been working more with in the last couple years. But, you know, the mentality behind it is either to draw in ink or ink existing pencil lines. And I came from years and years of inking existing pencil lines, so the whole drawing in ink is a little bit off and odd for me. So, let's see. One of the things about using a brush, especially a larger brush like this, is that, I don't know if you can even see it, but the pen or the brush tip will occasionally splay out at the end. And I have my washcloth over here. It's just a old, wore out washcloth that I will kind of fix the end of the brush on, clean it up a little bit here and there. So, excuse me. Eyeball, cheek, lash. This is pretty extreme for shortening, so it's not something I do a ton. I used to try and do a lot more and then realize that even if you get it right, it could easily go badly. Like if you get it technically correct with the anatomy and everything, it can still look wrong. So, you know, it's one of those things that as an artist I kind of moved away from. Every so often you just plain gotta do it. And, you know, it's a challenge. It's a good challenge to take on and not be fearful of. I don't really want her looking like she's smiling, and at this angle it's super difficult to do anything but make her look like she's smiling, because the corners of the mouth perk up very quickly at this angle. So it's a matter of getting that just right. Shading. I do most of my black spotting in ink, in the inking stage. I used to do everything in pencil as tightly as I could, or as tightly as I was comfortable with, which wasn't super tight as some people are, and then, you know, ink it, try to ink it as verbatim as I could. But two things usually happen with that. One, the gray of the pencil never has as much weight as the black of the ink. So I'd almost inevitably throw the picture out of balance with the ink because my estimations in graphite just weren't accurate. So doing the blacks in ink specifically helps keep things in balance a lot better visually. And the other thing about it is it helps, you know, I can build back and forth with the brush, especially I can do it very, very quickly, you know, and build from black space to texture to black space to texture in a better overall composition and rhythmic way. That's a big part of the reason why I enjoy such a large brush, is because I can do, you know, large spot blacks on the fly and, you know, do textures of hair and stuff. The big key to doing that is to how much you load the brush. I usually only dip it in about halfway in the ink. I might dip it twice because the ink's kind of low right now, so it only really gets about a quarter of the way up the brush bristles. And then, like I had mentioned earlier, I might smooth out the tip of it. She's got a ponytail and these. Her hair's pulled back in a ponytail except for the two strands on the side, so I'm trying to get them. I'm sure there's some sort of technical name for that. She's got bangs and she's got these longer bangs. But like, the other fun thing about doing, the fun thing I say, meaning fun and potentially train wrecking, about working this way is that I can do stuff like hair and it can build the volume up in a much cleaner kind of way and more flow to it. Also, I think it's just a case where my eyes are just getting bad enough that the black is a much easier thing for me to see than the gray of the pencil. So my eyes and my brain are reacting, damn it, that's wiggly, are reacting a lot better. I haven't warmed up, so you're going to get some choppy, wiggly lines. I switched from the brush I was using yesterday. I've got two of these, actually I've got like three of them, but I only use two of them for the moment. And I'll rotate them back and forth, usually from day to day, and just to help keep them maintained and clean. And so she's wearing like looks like a bulletproof vest type thing. So this is me trying to demonstrate forms in a kind of awkwardly foreshortened situation. So I think do some feathering in here. So I don't want it to be totally blacked, but because this is her underside, it needs to have a little bit of shading. Star, star, star. I'm okay with doing, you know, these sorts of straight lines with the brush as long as they're pretty short. If there's anything longer, because some of this goes a little curvilinear. Let's double outline. Double outline. Double outline. But I, you know, through years of practice and just trial and error, I've gotten really good at making nice, clean, small lines as well. And you know, you can be very expressive with the brush, more so than any other inking tool, even more so than a dip pen, because dip pens, you know, they have that versatility of line, versatility, that's the word, versatility of line, but I always struggle to get them to look smooth. I'm not, you know, Richard Friend is a really good example of an inker that can get that super clean, smooth line. So is Jay Leaston. you know, a super clean, smooth line out of a pen, and I just, mine always come up with these rougher, jagged edges that just plain don't get there. And my brush work is much cleaner, much smoother. I tend to be much happier with it. One of the other reasons I enjoy using such a large brush is because it holds a lot of ink and I don't have to fill it very often. Downside to that is if I want to go quickly between a smooth, clean line and a dry brush line, I either have to kind of clean off the pen and unload it on my washcloth or the brush, or I, you know, just have to work with it until it goes dry on its own, which can take a bit. So I have to do a little thinking ahead. Shit. That one went hard. I'll have to fix that. It went too far out, so it made the mass of the arm look a little bit too big for my interest. But I have the option of whiteout. So I used to be really adverse against using whiteout and try to be just as clean and as smooth as I could. And then I noticed that my thought process of being as clean and smooth as possible started creating a lot of tension in my hand, and it turned into an issue of I was just tightening up really badly all over my body, and that tension was coming through in the work, and it made my line work be way more just the opposite of what I was aiming for. It made me be way more tense and just it was fucking up my lines. So, you know, once I realized, and once I saw Jason Alexander's work, Scott Alexander on YouTube, he just slathers his pages in whiteout as he's drawing. He uses whiteout like most people use an eraser for pencil, and you know he'll have panels that are half whiteout by the time he's done, and he uses actual like I think it's Bic whiteout in this stick or whatever, and he just gets at it and just that's just part of his process. And as I was watching him work, I realized that why should I be so anal about it? Be okay with screwing it up. Be okay with fixing it with whiteout. Be okay with, that stuff can easily be edited out in Photoshop and make the final image be clean. So there's zero reason to get so uptight about it. Liefeld patches, pockets, Liefeld pockets. Honestly, this isn't something I highly recommend of penciling stuff in as you're inking, because it can throw your composition out of whack. Unless it's little details like that, like this pocket. Two little stripy things. hell am I hearing? Sounds like something's like whining. I don't know. Can't tell if it's music or if it's a siren because it sounds like both. I live on a, I wouldn't call it a big street, but it's definitely a busy street. Especially right now because one of the main bridges to get from our side of town to the other side of the river is out and has been for like over a year. So people cut through our street and go around on the bridge that's the other way to get downtown. And so we get all kinds of traffic noises here. And some of the stuff that I hear go by is just like, what the fuck is that? It's like some little podunk car or whatever, and his brakes are grinding or dragging its muffler. I'm shocked at how many people's mufflers are dragging. It's fascinating. It's like, why don't you get a little baling twine and a wire or something and get under there and just latch that up. Alright, I gotta figure out what this noise is because it's driving me nuts. So, I'll be back. See ya.